In 2012, a study was conducted detailing how the Tasmanian tiger, otherwise known as the thylacine, was already doomed before the event of humans landing in Australia due to their genetics. Thylacines look very dog-like, having a similar appearance to the dingo, but with stripes on its back like a tiger. The thylacine was a marsupial, meaning that it was a mammal with a pouch for carrying its young, similar to wombats, kangaroos, and koalas. Despite being called the Tasmanian tiger, it was found on both Tasmania and on the mainland of Australia. But the main population of thylacines were isolated on Tasmania after it separated from the mainland, with only a small group of thylacines remaining on the rest of Australia as recently as 3,000 years ago. The Australian government put a bounty on the thylacines as they were a pest to farmers' livestock, and eventually the thylacines went extinct in 1936. It was assumed that the thylacines went extinct entirely due to humans hunting them, which is correct to a degree, but even without human involvement they would have succumbed to their own genetics. This was discovered through genetic analysis of preserved thylacine specimens and showed that the thylacine was in poor genetic shape prior to human inhabitation of Australia, as there was a lack of genetic diversity between individuals. Genetic diversity is what makes you look different from your neighbour and allows us to survive diseases as a whole. Whereas some people may be vulnerable, the majority will be able to fight off the disease. For example, if we look at a section of DNA in the thylacines, we would expect only one genetic difference. However, if we looked at another animal, such as a dog, we would find at least 5 or 6 genetic differences. This low number of genetic variation means that the thylacines would be extremely susceptible to diseases, and one disease could wipe out the entire species. In fact, this is happening right now to the Tasmanian devils. The devils also have very low genetic variation, similar to the thylacine, and are now being wiped out by a transmissible cancer that the devils are struggling to fight against. The cause of the low genetic variation in thylacines was first thought to be inbreeding, but further insight into the genetics of the thylacine showed that this actually occurred back in the most recent ice age by an event called bottlenecking. Bottlenecking occurs when a large population is reduced to a small population. This can cause a population with a high genetic variation to become a population with very low genetic variation. For example, thylacines that survived the Ice Age would have been more suited to a cold environment, and the others that couldn't stand the cold will have died, leaving a limited amount of genetic variability in its wake. This would lead to the remaining thylacines being left to repopulate Australia, but genetic variation takes a lot of time to build up, so at this point the thylacines were at extreme risk of extinction. They managed to survive until humans arrived in Australia, but the population was already starting to decline before humans arrived. This was compounded further by the separation of Tasmania from the mainland. This caused another bottleneck as the population of thylacines was separated from each other. If humans hadn't come along, they still would have died eventually, but not nearly as quickly as they did with the presence of humans. This study shows the importance in examining endangered or extinct animals for genetic diversity, as a lack of genetic diversity can kill just as easily as a bounty. The research is useful for other cases as well, especially in the case of the Tasmanian devil, which is suffering from being endangered, being stricken with disease, being unable to respond effectively due to their low genetic diversity. This research allows for a greater conservation effort to be put in place to help these devils survive and to try to prevent it from occurring in other species. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found it entertaining and informative.